Hey everybody, we are excited to relaunch the FERC Professionals Group. This is our first one of 2022 since the relaunch, and we're excited with our special guest, Becky Blalock, who I will introduce shortly. And I just wanted to send a welcome back. We will be discussing the topic of key trends within the energy industry, and Becky's going to be able to create some incredible insights, updates, and some nuggets along the way for our FERC Professionals Group. And with that, I just want to say welcome back. It is glad to be, I am so glad to be back here with you during this event. It's exciting. It's something that we look forward to here at HData, and a big thing of what we would love to share with this group, as we are a community that is FERC reporting professionals interested in solutions for producing and consuming financial and operational data. And I hope one of our goals here is that you create a networking opportunity with FERC energy regulated professionals, that this is a network that you find insights and that you find peers and relationships that you can build upon within your career. And I hope that this is a place in a community you can find that. And so with that, I just want to make a quick note that you can follow along a lot of our weekly updates that we're going to be posting within our LinkedIn community group. You can go to LinkedIn, join us there, search for FERC Professionals Group. Under LinkedIn, make sure to join. We'll be able to add you to the group. You'll be able to see firsthand insights of everything that's happening here with the FERC Professionals Group, and we're so excited that you're here making time, giving of time to join us, and I know we're in for a treat. Just give you a quick rundown of our agenda. We're starting off with some opening remarks. Hello again, good to see you. I'll be introducing our special guest speaker, Becky Blalock, and then we'll have some time for Q&A and open discussion. And then I'll toss it over to our founder and CEO of HData, Hudson Hollister. He'll be able to talk a little bit about some updates in FERC reporting, compliance, and so many other things. And there may be a little surprise at the end. So stick around for that. And then we'll have some fellowship time and just some closing remarks. And again, just want to give you a quick agenda. And with that, I want to introduce our special guest speaker. We're so excited to have Becky Blalock. She's the former Senior Vice President and CIO at Southern Company, spent an illustrious 30 plus years with Southern Company, ranging from roles in finance, accounting, economic development, corporate communications, and also being able to have preparation needs for a lot of the FERC reporting needs for Southern Company. And she's going to be teeing up this conversation with key trends within the energy industry, and due to a minor recording glitch on our end, we're going to be picking up in the conversation where Becky starts her discussion within the key trends through the lens of ESG metrics, and we'll pick up where Becky talks about renewables and ESG metrics. Enjoy.
Way it's possible continues to be, I think, one of the major trends with this industry. It's going to be interesting to see if renewables stand up to the hope, because everybody's making this big push to move away from fossil fuels. And I think those of us in the industry understand that, renewables can't meet everything right now. Hopefully they will in the future. In fact, one of the other really big trends happening right now is on this whole ESG front. And when I originally, people started talking about ESG, BlackRock came out, Larry Fink, their CEO, and wrote a letter about how he was going to begin to hold investors accountable. And it wasn't just him. Now, a lot of the people that control a lot of the wealth in this country are saying we're not going to put our money into companies that are not being clean. And it's not just being clean, it's companies that don't have good governance, and companies that don't have diversity and aren't treating their employees appropriately. I kind of think of the ESG as those are the non-financial metrics that can impact the long-term value of a company. These are things that if the company doesn't manage them well, could come back to really haunt investors in the future if they put money in these companies. And the reason I've been kind of coming up to speed on this is, as Drew said, I serve on a public company board. I chair the Nomination and Governance Committee, and I have been anointed. I'm always anointed as the cybersecurity expert on the board, but I've also now been anointed the ES&G experts. So I have been going through a lot of training myself to find out exactly what's involved in all of this. And it's extremely complicated. And there are going to be huge, I think, compliance challenges around getting your arms around how companies are meeting the needs. The SEC has just come out and said that they're going to clamp down on companies who are doing greenwashing. There are a lot of companies that are saying, well, we have our employees working from home, so, the cars aren't on the road. But, truth of the matter is, now that people are at home, they're using more energy in their homes, which aren't usually insulated as well as manufacturing buildings. So there's all this controversy around, counting apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. And we've got some time to get this figured out. All companies have been told they've got to set this benchmark, all public companies. And so everybody's scrambling to figure out what is our carbon footprint. And then once you set that target, you have until, I believe it's 2035 to cut that target in half. And then by 2050, you're supposed to be carbon neutral. And of course, renewables are going to be a big part of making that happen. The other big part of that is they say electric vehicles will be the other part of it. And of course, electric vehicles are going to have a huge impact on this industry because people will be charging their cars, which is going to be a huge load. But also at the same time, those cars, in the future, I think will be used to better regulate as well, because people can plug their car in and you can drain the battery off of the car to fuel the house, maybe even sell it back into the grid. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day that has a Tesla, and I didn't realize this. He told me that in the state of Georgia, he said, I actually make money with my car. He said, because Georgia Power has a rate where I plug it in and they use the power off my car. And I thought, well, that is certainly the future that's coming. So that's just one of the things that's really impacting this industry. The other thing, of course, is labor. I spent, as Drew said, 30 some odd years in the utility industry. And when I came into the workforce at the end of the 70s, I was on the back end of this huge thing called the baby boomers. And I was lucky to even get a job. There were very few jobs for people coming out of college at the end of the 70s. Inflation was double digits. Interest rates. I remember when I first went to work for Georgia Power, we had some first mortgage bonds that were paying 21%. And we were building our first, actually it was our second nuclear plant. The original estimate on that plant was $640 million for 2 units. And we ended up bringing up for 4 units, $640 million for 4 units. We actually ended up bringing on 2 units at $9.2 billion. And so those were really challenging times. We look at today and we think today's really challenging, but then I think back about what things were like in the 70s, and they really were much worse then. But there were plenty of people to do jobs back then. There are not people to do jobs, and this is an industry, the power industry. It's not real attractive to a wide swath of people. Not just anybody wants to be out in the heat like we have today, climbing up 1,000-foot poles and working on transmission lines. It's very dangerous work, and it requires somebody who's very skilled and educational. So I think that continues to be a huge challenge. That's why I like H data, is because it's one more tool out there that's going to automate something that's been done manually and help companies operate a whole lot more efficiently. I think the second big trend, another big trend, not the second one, but another big trend that's happening is the grid it's actually the largest machine on Earth. And I spend a lot of time around talking to people about cybersecurity. And of course, everybody's always saying, what if they take the grid down? And my view has always been that the grid is very resilient. The grid gets taken down all the time. There's hurricanes, there's earthquakes, there's lightning strikes. And so it gets rerouted and it comes back up. I think it would be very difficult for anybody to take down the grid for any extended period of time. Now I say that and then somebody causes some big blackout tomorrow. But the problem with the grid is it was built before cybersecurity was an issue. we didn't really have the internet in the industry. I can remember in 1996, the Olympics came to Atlanta and Georgia Power was an Olympic sponsor. And I was over corporate comm at the time. And I went to our CEO and I said, we need a web page. He said, a what? I said, we need a web page. I said, if we're going to be this Olympic sponsor, I think people from all over the world will want to come. He said, have you lost your mind? He thought it was the craziest thing in the world that I thought we needed a web page. And then I remember when email came along and I was talking to some of our executives. I said, well, we had just gotten email, but it was only inside the company. You couldn't send an email outside to anybody. And this was like, I think 1993. And I was telling somebody, I said, well, I'll send you an email about that. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, it's this electronic desktop tool that we have. And I'll just send you a message about it. And he said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. He goes, why would you take the time to type out a message when all you got to do is pick up the phone and call? And it just shows you how we so underestimate the power of what technology can do. And that's why I was so thrilled when I saw that these FERC forms have been automated, because I used to, as a financial analyst years ago in my career, my job was to fill those forms out. I filled them out for Georgia Power, and then it would go up to Southern Company. All of our companies got consolidated, and then it would actually go into FERC. And there's reams and reams of very wonderful data in there, but it's just trying to compile that was a lot of work, number one. And then number two, there's such great data where you could compare yourself to other utilities out there, find out who's the best at doing what they do, and then bring that back to your company. But you'd spend your career trying to pile through all that information. Now at your fingertips, you'll have all that information there. And it's going to just allow you to have incredible insights and visibility. One of the things that will be interesting is as you get more insights into what's happening at other utilities and begin to do some benchmarking, is that with that transparency does come some issues. Like I could see where if you're looking at who's the utility in the country that has the the lowest cost of transmission. Well, what you got to do is look at geography and consider that too. I mean, one state may have a lot of mountains, and so it's much more expensive to build and maintain a system there than it is in, say, a flat state like Arizona. I know that too, the state of Florida has a lot more outages than anybody else because they have more lightning strikes. So there are things like that people will have to come to reason and to use that reason in terms of looking at it. But I would think that if you're a regulator, that is just going to be a gold mine of data, instead of having to plunge through all those reports, being able to electronically go in and look at and compare utilities and find out who is performing the very best. I think too that there's got to still be a lot of work done, not just modernizing the grid and modernizing all of the back office that goes with it, but just thinking about the fact that the grid it was never built to have two-way flows. The grid was built to generate electricity and distribute it out to the customer. And now with renewables, we've got a situation where that end customer, as I talked about with electric vehicles, may be generating power themselves and wanting to sell back into the grid. What is really challenging, I think, about this industry is that it's a product that cannot be stored. It has to, as you know, it has to be manufactured as it's used. And I've always been in awe of the fact that the industry does as good a job as they do at predicting the day ahead, how much load they got to bring up the next day and keeping it up and meeting the needs of everybody. But now we're in a situation where power needs to flow back the other way. And there's a lot of change in the infrastructure. There's a lot of data that's going to have to be gathered in order to better balance what those baseload units are going to have to bring up the next day. And all that is well underway. What's really bad about this industry is it's very risk adverse, and for good reason. Very dangerous business. It's not one where a lot of risk and innovation has typically been rewarded. And so, you just haven't seen a lot of advances, really. Battery technology, I think, is still 20 years away. When I retired from Southern Company 10 years ago, I thought, oh, in 10 years, they'll have that all figured out and they'll be able to store energy. We are still a long way off, and still lithium ion seems to be the best, way to store energy, even though there are constantly new ideas cropping up. And the problem with lithium ion, in my opinion, is it's not very clean. If you've seen how they tear the earth up, pulling those minerals out to make these batteries, I think that's a challenge. But it does seem to be the most economic way to store, but there's no way to efficiently store huge amounts of data like you see on the grid. And so I think that we're going to continue to have some really big issues as it comes to that. Anybody else have anything that I've missed here that I've talked about? I do think the cyber issue is going to continue to be huge. I'm doing a lot of training for other boards. I serve on the board of the National Association of Corporate Directors Atlanta chapter, and I've always been sort of their cybersecurity expert. So then they came to me and said, well, will you start going and training other boards? And so I try to keep myself up on what's happening with cyber, but I got to tell you, it's just such a changing landscape. And with the war that's happening, we've seen a huge increase in attacks. I just have to tell you, anybody that tells you that you're not going to be a victim is not telling you the truth. But we're fortunate in that the utility industry has invested heavily in cybersecurity. I was a part of a benchmarking group for utilities. All the utility CIOs would get together and share best practices, and we decided that somebody needed to go to EEI and talk to our CEOs and tell them that we were sitting ducks on security. So they decided that I would be the guinea pig. I'd be the one that had to go before them and talk to them about how at risk we were, because the grid was built before any of this was an issue. We had all these control systems out there that all somebody had to do was stick a thumb drive in them and they could bring the entire industry down. And this was in, I will say, around 2010. I went and talked to that group. And this is also pre all the ransomware attacks and the huge issues that you began to see companies have. And the feedback I got back from my CEO is that I was an alarmist and that they quit listening to me because they just felt like what I was saying was out of sync with reality. And fast forward to today, I don't think anybody would say that if I went in there today. I wonder if those people remember me going into that meeting and educating them on where the issues were and where the holes were, and if they would still say that I was an alarmist today. I don't think they would.
I don't think so. And I'd love to pause there and bring in a little bit of that conversation where we are in 2022. What are those opportunities to modernize a lot of, whether it's data reporting or business intelligence within an electric utility?
Well, artificial intelligence is going to change everything. It's that, and the fact that now you have the Internet of Things, where you've got devices out there literally on everything. And this was part of what my message was to them, that, the more you digitize things, the more at risk you put yourself if you're not building security into the tools. And we had actually chosen an automated meter reading company. It was funny because for years we could never get the business case to get rid of meter readers and to automate just that little process. And along comes the government, who gives us money, gives the utility industry money, and says, hey, we will pay for it if you'll go out and you'll do the modernization. So, hey, you're getting free money, go out and do it. I got to tell you, that you don't see things on the back end that are benefits. You don't see those on the front end. And one of them was just safety. I think about the fact we used to have people walking out into people's yards and they would constantly get chewed up by dogs and, hit by cars, all kinds of things. So our safety record improved dramatically. Second thing is we got all those cars off the road. So from an environmental standpoint, I mean, that was huge. But those were two things that we never saw on the front end when we were doing the benefit. The other thing, as I talked about earlier, is a lot of this back office kind of work that has been done. And I just know that from a compliance standpoint, we were spending on the company whose board that I'm on, we were spending weeks pulling together some compliance reports and got some tools that automated it, and it's done in 3 hours now. And so I think finding those kinds of tools that help automate these processes and take that manual work off of people, because people are going to be even more scarce as we move forward, is going to be critical. And they're being developed every day, just like it is with H data. And so I'm thrilled that we've already had some regulators who have discovered us and some utilities. And as they get it, when you get in there and start using the tool, you're going to find ways to become more efficient that you never even dreamed about. When I came to work for this industry, we used to manually do the general ledger. That's how long I've been around. So seeing this change is phenomenal. Our internal auditors for the board that I'm on, a lot of the audit now is done through artificial intelligence. They don't have to go in and manually test all these controls. It's automatically built into the tool, and it's smart enough to determine it. I think cybersecurity will get a little cleaner now, because what happened is, you got these tools that monitor what's going on with your network, and you can see if somebody has, slipped in a bot that is, malware that's beginning to misbehave on the network. But a lot of times you get these false positives. And my team used to spend hours going in and evaluating all these alarms that they've gotten, and they were false alarms. Whereas artificial intelligence will be smart enough to look at the network without having to have a human involved, and can tell you if it's something you need to be alarmed about or not. And it can automatically just shut down something that doesn't look like it belongs on your network. So I think artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the whole fact that, it used to be that wireless wasn't everywhere. Well, now wireless is becoming ubiquitous. And we figured out all these ways. I remember when we were putting the automated meter reading out there, some of these meters were out in the middle of nowhere. And so it could be collecting data all day long, but it didn't have any way to get it back. And then they came up with this mesh network where you could communicate from one meter to the next meter until it could get to a tower and get back to the corporate office. So I think keeping up with all that is going to be really very difficult too. And like on cybersecurity, for every answer we find, there are smart people. And it's not just people. The problem with cybersecurity is this is state sponsored. You've got governments who are paying people to do nothing but sit in buildings all day long and try to find ways to get in here and steal our intellectual property and wreak havoc on our systems. And most of the time they're in your systems and you don't even know it. But like I said, the tools do continue to get better in the way of artificial intelligence and robotics too. I think there's a big place for robotics in this industry. You've got robots now that crawl up and down the transmission line. And if it looks like the transmission line is weak or going to break, you can go in and proactively fix it. They've got sensors now that are in the substations that monitor things. I can remember we used to have substations that would just blow up, particularly right here in the summer. And now you've got sensors in there that tell you if something is off, and you can proactively go and fix it. Same thing with transformers out there on the pole. We still have transformers that blow, but the newer technology that's coming out is putting sensors in there so that if something looks like it's off with either the amount of oil that's in the transformer or something's happening with the electronics on it, that you proactively go out there before it actually goes offline. And that allows you to be a lot more efficient too. It's a whole lot easier to fix something than it is to have to go out and totally replace it.
That's
And I'm
great.
sure I've missed some things out, because I have to tell you, for a sleepy, stodgy business, this has become, I think, one of the more exciting places to be. And who would have known that the stock market would have favored energy companies like it has this past year? I wish I'd taken all my money out of the market and put it all in energy.
Right.
A lot
That's
prettier
amazing.
than I am now. Yes.
No, I vividly remember you were talking about sensors and the measurement of things. When I worked at Altec, I remember watching a project at a transforming site. We had a sensory robot running the lines to and from, just measuring whether it was the different slag efforts that were happening in the wires, measuring those, or even putting sensors in all of your fleet that you'd see to how that measures predictive analytics, if you will. And that really gets into, you mentioned it earlier about kind of earlier in your career doing a lot of manual processes. If you had, thinking of our group, we've got some friends from the Public Utilities Commission world. We've got some friends from other local regional electric utilities in the webinar meeting with us. If you had one recommendation, like let's say you started within the regulatory affairs team here in 2022, what would be kind of your main first recommendation for someone coming into this industry?
Well, first of all, find out who your peers are. You know,
There you
I
go.
always tell people, and I will say this, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm a great networker. And I know that 10 people are a whole lot smarter than one. And any job I ever went into, the first thing I did is I tried to build a group of my peers across the country that I could share best practices with, because so many of the things we struggle with, people at other companies are struggling with too. They've already solved them. I'm proud to say that when I was at Southern, there was no networking group for CIOs. And so I had talked to my peers at Florida Power and Light and at Entergy, and between us, we knew everybody in the industry. We made phone calls and got everybody together and decided we would start sharing best practices on a regular basis. They would fly into the Atlanta airport. There's a conference center in the Atlanta airport. And it was so relieving to know that, oh, I'm not the only one struggling with these issues. And that group is called Unite, and they're still in place, still, you know, continuing to get together and share best practices even today. It started off looking at financial data, and then it moved beyond that to talking about, well, hey, what's going on with your company? You know, like one of the things I just shared with the guy that runs that, I said, you know, you should take this H-Data platform back to all of those CIOs and talk to them about the fact that this is something their companies need to be using, because it can help their teams be more efficient, gives them better insights into what's happening at other utilities, so they know they can call somebody and say, gosh, you're the best in the class on this. How are you doing that? And, you know, I think the higher up the ladder you go, the less the job is really about you, but it's more about who you surround yourself with and who you can pick up the phone and call when you hit a roadblock. So having a group like this where you can come, hopefully one of these days you guys can all get together face to face. But I think Zoom is wonderful because even though you're not meeting somebody face to face, I'm amazed at how you can build a relationship with people over these electronic platforms. I've been doing work with one company for like 3 years, and I've never seen anybody face to face, but we have this great team and we've won all kinds of business right over using technology. So the world is changing, and there's so many things like Zoom that you can bring to the work environment now that do create a lot of efficiency. Just think about the wasted time in travel. If we had all traveled to go somewhere to meet face to face, and we can sit here and have this call instead. So it's just there's no end to what's coming. You know, I read something. I was just reading yesterday some cybersecurity stuff, and it says the amount of information in the world has doubled in the last 2 years. So that means that throughout history, all the data, all the information created doubled in the last 2 years. That's just phenomenal when you think about it. And I'm always in awe of not only of the electricity industry, but I'm also always in awe of IT, because they have to keep up with a lot of change too. And it's just, you know, they have this thing called Moore's Law, that every 18 months. That information doubles and the price cuts in half. And I keep thinking when Moore's law is not going to apply anymore, but it's still alive and well.
Oh, that's spot on there. That's a great reference. And getting back to earlier in our conversation, there was a question. And if anyone does have questions for Becky or the conversation, feel free to put that in the chat area. There was a question that came in around ESG reporting. It's clear that the SEC is the first agency to start an ESG reporting requirement, and the SEC is doing this for public companies. Becky, would you expect that the other ESG reporting requirements might come from other government agencies and maybe might not be tied to being only a public company?
I think that's a great question. I think this thing is still settling down because I'm also on a private company board and they have no clue about all this stuff. Right now, it's mostly investors that are putting pressure on these boards. It's interesting because when I first brought this up, I chair nomination and governance. A couple of our board members said, we don't have time for that. And there's just too many other things going on that we weren't required to do any reporting, which, now you are required at least to set the baseline and to set that target. And you're going to get beat up. There are these proxy groups that are called ISS anyway, and Glass Lewis, and they rate boards and how effective they are. And you're going to get beat up pretty badly by them. And then when it comes time to vote in directors, you can be voted out if your shareholder base feels very strongly about it. And Larry Fink and these other big investors that said they're going to start taking board members out, and you're beginning to see that happen. So all of a sudden, there is a wake-up call that board members need to pay attention to this. And the problem was the standards have not been there in the past. There is a group called SASB, and SASB is now merging with another group. And I apologize, I don't have all the acronyms in front of me right now, but apparently they're going to settle on these standards within the next year. And companies are now required by the SEC to have disclosure in the 10Q and the 10K, but there's no definition around what that disclosure needs to look like. They're also supposed to have disclosure now around cybersecurity too. And some companies have taken to the extreme, and they're doing all kinds of greenwashing. They're not really doing anything that makes them carbon neutral as a company. They're just on a PR campaign talking about things that don't really matter, like maybe making your roof green or something. I mean, sure, I'm sure that helps your building, but what does that do overall if you're polluting and putting all kinds of terrible things in the ground and in the air? And so they have said that they're going to come out and start really taking a look at that. One of my big things has been, well, who's going to audit this for all these companies? SOX came along, and SOX was just a nightmare for all corporations, all public companies. Did it make us better? Yeah, it did make us better. But talk about a lot of bureaucracy and a lot more reporting, a lot more onerous oversight. SOX certainly created that. And the accounting firms, I'm sure they love that, these big 8 firms, because they're the ones that come in and audit it, and it put a lot more money in their pockets. But who's going to audit this? Is it going to be some group that's a part of the SEC? Is it going to be some environmental group? Is it going to be, the Department of Environmental Affairs? All of that is still being decided. But what you see happening now are these big 8 accounting firms are going out and quickly staffing up around ESG and trying to position themselves as the ones who will come in and audit these issues. And anyway, and it's a cottage industry that's springing up everywhere. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for a new opportunity, I have to tell you, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that space according to how it shakes out. But here's the other thing that I'm very curious about is that gasoline prices going through the roof, massive, blackouts. Is that going to lessen the control on fossil fuels and lessen the focus on renewables? Because my concern is, if you look at the data, I've been trained by these experts. The world cannot afford for us to wait on this stuff. We have got to do something to cut these greenhouse emissions. The catastrophic things that are going to happen to the next generation because of what's going to happen with climate change. Some of it's already happening, but it is going to be severe. We can't just pick up and go to Mars or go somewhere else. There isn't but one planet. And so I think there is a sense of urgency, but there is going to be this really big, it has been for years, this big battle about the fact that, we don't want to hurt the economy. And, we're still don't have good answers. I was encouraged recently because they said something like 70% of the issue that we have can be met through electric vehicles, getting cars off the road. And all the big manufacturers are moving quickly to change out their production to electric. And I'm seeing our industry make a change as fast as they can to renewables. It's just that, unfortunately, renewables, while they continue to accelerate in their advancement every year, are not where they need to be to meet all of our needs. And so anyway, we got to have a foot in both camps, and we got to continue to revitalize and make that old energy infrastructure as efficient as possible, while quickly moving forward to renewables and building what we need in the renewable space.
That's fantastic. Becky, thank you for sharing incredible insights. I know I wrote down a slew of notes, big takeaways for if you're getting into regulatory affairs or you're in there, you want to make that next leap. Know who your peers are, networking, being able to surround yourself with the right kind of people. But I think what Becky mentioned was like, surround yourself with the right kind of people that challenge you to do the next best right thing. I think, Becky, that's what you mentioned earlier in your career. Even though you were called an alarmist, I think you were almost prophesying into what could be, just to be getting people thinking outside of the comfort box in a way, but leveraging IoT and wireless and cybersecurity going
Drew,
forward.
I'll just share this one story real quick, and then I'll leave. And that's because while you've got everybody here together, I always think it's really smart people that take advantage of these opportunities to come and meet their peers. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I always say you should select them very carefully. But I had a situation that happened to me at Southern Company where we had an intern when I was the CIO, who we would always give them easy jobs. And the easy job was to wipe the servers clean before we turned them in for lease. We didn't want the corporate data going into to some company. And the intern did not disconnect a computer from the network, and he put in the code to wipe it, and he randomly deleted 80% of the company's corporate data. And my infrastructure guy came up to my office about 30 minutes after it happened, and he was kind of pompous about it. So, it's going to give us a chance to test our disaster recovery. We'll have this all fixed back up and running in about 2 hours. He said, but your phone's going to be ringing because people in the business are going to be mad because they can't get their work done. So I picked up the phone and called the CEO, and I said, you just need to know this has happened, and he says, when's it going to be fixed? I said, it won't be bad. It's a huge issue. We're not going to have it fixed until tomorrow. Because I learned, always promise much later than you think you can do it. So 2 hours later, my infrastructure guy comes back up and says, we think we're going to have it. We're going to need another 2 hours. Well, IT people are notorious for telling you, I just need 2 more hours. I just need 10 more minutes. Well, that means they don't know how to do it. And I thought, we're in trouble. I thought, I better get on the phone and start calling some other CIOs. So I picked up the phone and I called this guy named John Cyril, who's a CIO at GE Power Systems. And I called John Michelle Ayers, who was the CIO at Coca-Cola at the time. And I called Dave Barnes, he was the CIO at UPS. And when I called all 3 of them, they kind of chuckled and said, oh no, that's never happened here, but let me know how this turns out. And called 2 or 3 other people, and then I called this woman named Kristen Kirkconnell at Atlanta Gas Light, and I said, Kristen, has this ever happened to you? She said, yes, it has. I said, how long did it take you to recover? She said, 3 days. I said, 3 days? I'm going to get fired. I said, payroll is going out to 26,000 people tomorrow. I said, I'm going to be the most hated person in the company. She said, no. She said, it won't take you 3 days. She said, it took us 3 days to figure out the issue. She said, Becky, the problem is you don't have enough storage on your system. She said, you just got to get more storage in there. And then when you try to bring everything back up, you'll have the capacity for what you need. And so then I thought, oh, great. You don't just go down to Walmart and buy this kind of capacity. So then I picked up the phone and I called my EMC rep, who I had a great relationship with. Anybody we were real dependent on, I always had a great relationship with. And he said, Becky, we don't have any of that equipment in the Southeast. He said, it'll take us 3 days to get it here. And I said, I got to have it. I got to have it like now. You got to help me find it. So he said, well, let me get my team together and see what we can do. So he called me back and said that they had just delivered the very equipment I needed to Scientific Atlanta, and that they had called the CIO there who knew me and we were friends. And he said, we don't even need it right now. Truck it down to Southern Company, let them have it. And so that's what happened. And they trucked it down, got it to Southern Company about 2 o'clock in the morning. Once we got that storage and got it all hooked up, everything started coming back. And by 6 a.m. the next morning, it was all back. But the lesson in that is, if I had not had those relationships with people that I could pick up the phone and call and say, has this ever happened to you? If I'd not had the relationship with the vendor, I probably would have been retired early from Southern Company. So make the most of these kinds of opportunities. And Hudson, thank you for doing what you can to get people that are doing similar work together.
That's fantastic. What a good story. So big takeaway there is know your peers, know your network, and manage and build those relationships with like-minded folks. Just in the case that a disaster may happen at your place of business, but when it does, you know when to strike and strike fast. Becky, thank you so much for sharing insights and just updates on perspective in the electric utility industry. And we just value your insights and thank you for the time. And we're going to segue back into the second half of our presentation. And if you still have questions or anything like that, feel free to throw that in the chat. We'll still have some time at the end of our presentation to follow back up on that. So with that, I'd love to toss it over to our founder and CEO here at H-Data, Hudson Hollister, for a little bit of an insider news update. That's the segment we're going to call with that. And I'll turn it over to Hudson.
Drew, thank you so much. And Becky, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I'm still recovering from your war story. I think that might take me a while, but what a true testament to the need to maintain and to celebrate relationships with one's peers. That is something we can all take to heart, I think. I've got 3 really fast updates for you all about the software platform that H-Data runs. And the third one's a bit of a surprise. The third one is so new that I've never seen it. So fingers crossed for that third one. Drew, let's go to the next slide. The first update that I want to give to everybody is that our newest solution, the H-Data library, is live. It went live 9 days ago. We spend a lot of time talking to people who are professionals in FERC regulation. And as you know, our tools are intended to help professionals in FERC regulation manage and understand all of their information. We had kind of some counterintuitive feedback from people that work in FERC regulation. They told us that they have a hard time just searching for, finding, and downloading FERC forms. And we thought that's the simplest possible use case ever. Don't you want to analyze? Don't you want to actually do searches and benchmarks? And they said, yes, we want to do that. But sometimes all I want to do is grab a FERC form and print it even. So after finding that feedback somewhat counterintuitive, we realized that that's actually one area where we can help everybody that works with FERC regulation. And so in the space of less than 2 months, our development team created, QC'd, maintained, and launched what we call H-Data Library, and it's available on our platform today. H-Data Library allows our users to search for and download any FERC form that's been filed from 2011 all the way up to the present and in real time going forward. In addition, unlike our other tools, HData Library has a very interesting price. The price is free. We offer HData Library for free access alongside all the other things that we're doing. And so if you do in the course of your work, if you do have to grab FERC forms and you want a way to do it that's a lot easier than interacting with that eForms library that you might be familiar with at FERC.gov, you can try the HData Library. Would love to answer any questions about that. But in the interest of time, because I want to save some time for our surprise, let's go to the next slide. You are among the first to know that a brand new HData compliance solution will be launching in the fall. For those that are working on preparing and checking, validating, and filing FERC forms, and those that have to do that using the new XBRL format that the FERC rolled out last October, HData compliance will be the best way to get that work done. HData compliance is a result of listening to the people all over the market that are responsible for filing these forms. And it's the very first solution that is a result of that experience. Our team members have been behind the filing of over 300 FERC forms since the XBRL reporting requirement began, and HData compliance comes out of listening to the thousands of people that work on this task across the industry. HData compliance is going to offer some features that are unavailable anywhere else by any other tool that you might use to prepare and file FERC forms. HData compliance is going to include real-time validation. So as you're doing your work, as you're entering numbers, you can see if those numbers pass the FERC's validation checks. HData compliance is going to give you the easiest possible way to import from other sources and create your FERC filing. And it's going to export not just into PDF in a way that is visually appealing for those that have to review and sign off on your form. It's also going to export into Word. We are so excited to begin the rollout of HData compliance, and we're looking forward to interacting with y'all as we roll that out. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's go to the next slide. Stealing a page from the most famous technology executive in history, our co-founder and chief technology officer, Yuval Lubowicz. And one more thing. Many of you all know that we have been busy building new ways for our users to interact with FERC data. Some of you are aware that we've been working alongside Alabama Power Company to create an entirely new solution for analyzing FERC data, something that we call HData Insights, and that'll be released soon. Some of you, maybe a smaller portion of you all, know that HData Insights is going to provide new ways of interacting with FERC data that don't require you to know where to look on a FERC form to get the numbers. But none of you have seen what we're planning to do for our gas companies that have to track their operation and maintenance expenses. The reason why I am pretty sure that none of you have seen this new way of searching through operation and maintenance expenses for gas pipelines is that it's so new, I have not even seen it. I am about to get my first glimpse at the HData Insights gas operation and maintenance expense driver, and I hope it's good. Let's all figure that out together. I'm pleased to turn this over to our regulatory economist, Luke Ashton, who's going to spend a few minutes going through this new way to analyze the operation and maintenance expenses of regulated gas companies. Fire away, Luke.
Awesome. Thanks, Hudson. Yeah, so Hudson, if you could stop sharing your screen so I can share the driver. Thank you. So as Hudson mentioned, this is the first time he's going to be seeing it. So this is both a demo, but also I want to make sure that Hudson likes what he's seeing. So what we're focusing in on here, and as Hudson alluded to a little bit before, the design of our insight solution is to tackle a specific question or problem within the industry and really tie in our FERC data as well as other data sources like the EIA and really any other government related data source within energy and tie it into providing some kind of data solution in order to help answer your question. So we had gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of our industry partners of understanding, hey, we need to just quickly understand O&M at a very surface level, but then also being able to dive into it if we need to. And we've provided that functionality that's even better than what you can get within the FERC form. So for example, what I'm showing here is our gas O&M summary page. The idea is you can look at a single year in a single midstream pipeline that is in the gas industry and just get a quick look at how they are effective with their O&M costs. So we're looking at A&G, which is administrative and general expenses, divided by every dollar of revenue that that company receives. We can even divide it by the volume and decatherms that the pipeline is handling in transmission or storage. We can also do the same thing of focusing on O&M, operation maintenance cost divided by per dollar revenue and per volume. From there, we can even dive into the specific aspects of the utility or the midstream pipeline. We can talk about storage. So how much are we spending specifically on storage O&M divided by the number of decatherms of gas that we are storing? Same thing with transmission. We can understand transmission O&M divided by the actual amount of transmitted decatherms of gas through those pipelines, and then also understand that on a per dollar revenue basis. So that just gives you a quick little look at how the KPIs might look. And these are industry standard KPIs that we've actually gotten from feedback from our industry partners. So these are tried and true metrics. But we also just want to be able to show a quick look of how much are we actually spending on various aspects of the company. So if we're looking at natural gas storage expenses, you can look at transmission expenses, which in this case and what the FERC primarily regulates within the natural gas space is that transmission side of things. When a decatherm of gas crosses from one state line to another, that's when the FERC regulates it. So a lot of this is going to be focusing on the transmission expense, but we do have a lot of storage expenses and sometimes even gas utilities that do operate transmission lines across state lines are also filing production numbers with the FERC. So that will also be captured within here. And you can also look at A&G customer sales and expenses. So, how much are you spending on advertising? How much are you spending on salaries? That's all subsumed into that. Given this is a very cursory look at some of the O&M components within the FERC form too, we can actually do a deep dive into all the various line items. So if you're familiar with the FERC form, and if I remember correctly, this is going to be page 317. I think I've memorized almost all the schedules within the FERC form too. And if you're operating within electric, that's going to be page 320. But you'll note that if you dive into those FERC forms, and if you sign up for our FERC library solution, then you'll also see that as you dive into the forms themselves, it's all displayed out there, but it's very uninteractive. You can see it, but what we've done here is we've actually built out this system where you can provide subtotals for various different types of O&M. So if I want to look at the transmission cost, I can actually break that down into a tree format and understand and roll those up and down as I need to. So even if I don't need to go into like communication system expenses, I just want to understand the transmission operation expense. I can roll that back up and get the transmission operation expense for Adelphia Gateway or Algonquin or Alliance or really any FERC regulated gas utility or midstream pipeline. And that's separate from the maintenance costs. So as you can see within the FERC form, they do separate out by maintenance and operation. And we can even sub that out to transmission expenses total and then dive back into production. So if we want to look at production numbers, we can do that as well. So exploration and development, we can look at other gas supply, production and gathering, extraction expenses. These are all items that can be captured within the FERC form too. And you can easily find those within here without having to scroll through the entire FERC form 2 in order to find it. You can control what you're seeing within this view. And of course, you can always export anything that you need. So if you want to export it as a CSV, you can do that. Or if you want to expand this out, I can even export it as a PowerPoint. I can print it out as a PDF. I can export it as a CSV or Excel. This is all information that you can immediately gain access to, download, use for your own needs, and also create visualizations out of it that you can include in static reports. So if you want to include it in a PowerPoint to your CFO or anyone else that you report to, then you can use this not just as an interactive format, but also as a way to get out the data, get a visualization, hone in on that data that you need to look at in order to convey the information that you need to whoever you're reporting to. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back to Hudson.
Luke, thank you so much. I am pleased to confirm that I think it's good, and I'm relieved. For everybody's benefit, we are thrilled to have been reinvigorating the FERC Professionals Group, and grateful to Drew and the marketing team for their work in doing that. We're excited to have heard from Becky today, and we're excited to be posting this video and future ones to serve as a resource for the community and industry of those that work with regulatory information in the regulated energy industry. Drew, back over to you.
Thank you, Hudson. And just wanted to echo sentiments that Hudson shared with the group. We're so excited to have each of you here, the FERC Professionals Group. We look forward to make sure to see information. What Hudson mentioned about the video recording will be available in the next few days, and we'll make sure to share it first with the FERC Professionals Group. And then we will have more information about our upcoming meeting in July. And we hope to continue this cadence of having the monthly meetings. And we'll make sure that you hear it first. And then if you have any questions, feel free to see those in the chat. And I also just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to talk to you soon. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. And thanks again to Becky as our guest speaker and everyone who came to join today. Thank you.